everyone. How's everybody? Did everybody enjoy the keynote? I only saw some of it. Stimulating and ready for more, yes? Of course. All right, well, I'm going to be very brief. My name is Clint Kennedy. I'm the chair for this session, and I'm going to be doing very little of the work. These three wonderful people will be doing much of the legwork to get us started, but as you probably heard us talking, we would very much like this to be more of a dialogue and a conversation as opposed to just a sit and get. We will certainly honor the 11:30 cutoff, but again, let's make this, I like to run a kind of less formal presentation and just see where things take us. So our first presenters, Jenny and Michelle, are going to be talking about how we collaborate to achieve. So please, the stage is yours.
So we're going to figure out how to navigate this session as well. I'm Michelle Gohagon. I'm the technology facilitator for Middletown Public Schools. It is my second year in Middletown. Previously, before that, I worked with Jenny in Regional School District 13, which is Durham and Middlefield, right next door, as a tech integration specialist for K-6. To put my jobs in a nutshell, my job really is to, in Middletown, to train everybody, K through 12, 11 schools, support staff, central office, and to help make decisions in the area of technology for purchasing for students, teachers, all of those things. Manage data, assessment, all of those. Previously, I worked with Jenny on how to help teachers integrate technology into the classroom.
So I'm Jenny Lussier. I am a K-4 library media specialist. Somebody was saying LMSs before, and I always jump because I know that's not what you're talking about, and it cracks me up every time. I am an LMS, but I was formerly a classroom teacher, and then went back and got my library degree and collaborated, because that's really what we're talking about today, very closely with Michelle as a tech integration specialist and with obviously teachers and administrators and IT people in my district of Region 13 right now. So we wanted to start out just as a quick, just to try to see who our audience is here. What kind of people are IT people? I'm not even sure what categories to throw up right now.
Sure.
So, and education type people?
Administrators?
Anybody else that we missed? We're just trying to see what kind of people are.
I work for like a library consortium.
Okay.
Library.
Okay.
Full library. There. Oh, nice.
I always put librarians in with kind of like teacher education type things.
So what we started to look at, we've been working hard since, I think, when I left the classroom in 2007 and started working with Jenny, is in where we were in the district was kind of an infancy as far as adopting technology, especially at the lower grades, but even as we trickled up, and really trying to understand how to integrate technology. And it happened all very quickly and very successfully. And now that in Middletown, kind of doing the same thing, is how can we figure out what to adopt for whom? And with that, we decided to say, what characteristics of a strong team of collaborators allows for successful integration of technology in the classrooms, in people's professional roles. And we really said, when are people successful and when are they not successful? And how can we look at those characteristics and make sure that they exist for that? It was funny, we were listening to the keynote, and both of us are teachers originally, and I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. You know what he's talking about? And we're like, but this is kind of going along with what we wanted to talk about today, and how important this collaboration is to be successful.
So the first characteristic we came up with is that we need to have a shared vision, and it really has to come from something that is very carefully articulated and communicated, and comes from clear goals that everybody has set. And I think this is where it comes from. It's been interesting working with Michelle, because I'm definitely more in the schools and in the trenches, so to speak, but Michelle is like that bridge of that collaboration. And so Michelle would work with administrators and those type of people, and the IT folks, to kind of pull this all together.
So the conversation I usually have with teachers, if anyone else has had these conversations, whether in your professional role or if you are a teacher, they say, we need more technology. We're having this meeting because we need more technology. And I say, okay, for what? Because we need tablets. Okay, for what? For reading. What about reading? So it's kind of saying, let's get to that core, to that why. So when we all meet at the table, that we really have a clear vision in mind of what we want to achieve for our community. Because sometimes we work in our silos and we say, this is what we want for us. As the IT department, we want a strong infrastructure. As educators, we want all students to achieve and close learning gaps. But if we look at it as a shared vision, we can start to say, not just what we want for ourselves, what we envision for our professional roles, but what are we all collectively trying to achieve? And we all should be able to articulate that. Okay? As our role as educators, we're saying we want to impact learning. We want to improve student achievement. And then from that, what does that look like? Start to make goals for everybody in their professional roles, for teachers, for administrators, for IT leaders. What role do we play in that, and making that vision very clear? I know right now we're very fortunate in Middletown to be taking in a lot of technology, but we're like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Every meeting we say, what are we doing? We're going one-to-one, why? Now we can say we want a blended learning environment. Well, what is a blended learning environment? What needs to happen in every role? We need to have those discussions.
And I know that there have been times where people have gotten carts of iPads or carts of whatever, and they sit there because nobody knows what to do with them, and nobody knows why you have them. And so I think that's a clear, piece of why we need to talk about this. And even in public libraries, I think if you really think about what is it about your patrons' needs that that has to come as a community.
The next thing, and this is very difficult in organizations, in public schools, and libraries, is get everyone that you need to the table to, one, create that vision, and two, have conversations to start to implement that vision. One of the things that happened to us this year, we didn't know it was going to happen. My IT director and I, we sat down, we said, okay, I think we're ready for a one-to-one initiative at the high school. And we said, what should we get? We had this conversation with ourselves. And they were like, you know what, in order for this to happen, we need to get the superintendent and our curriculum leaders to the table. Yes?
Just when you say one-to-one, you mean one computer to one person?
Yes.
Or one device.
Or one device. Just for our freshmen, so that's about 400 kids. And we created this great plan, all of these things, and we're having this discussion. And we're like, this is never going to get through our budget. We're never going to get this approved. We sat down with our curriculum leaders and superintendents, and in 20 minutes, everyone bought the plan because we all were together. What is our goal, our educational goal? What do we want to get? How can we support it? And what professional development can we provide? And started really thinking about this. And if any of those pieces were missing, you probably wouldn't have gone through. And I think we're making the purchase next week for 450 Chromebooks, because we got everyone to the table.
And I think that it also is important because it brings different perspectives. This year in Region 13, we started to have, I think they're called instructional technology meetings, but for the first time we're actually bringing like tech ed people, so what we used to think of as shop teachers, but we're bringing those kind of people to the table with our IT people and our library media people and our tech integration people, and it's provided just another perspective on the different types of learning that students are doing and what kinds of things are needed in our schools right now.
And some examples of, and I'm sure you all have them, of what happens when you don't get everyone to the table. Last year we had a school win a grant to purchase technology, and they purchased 50 laptops. They didn't have one. Right? They were like, yes, of course. So this is so important, and we heard from the keynote speaker saying, you need to have those conversations. You need to make good decisions that are cost effective. And if you don't bring everyone to the table, you can't do that. And so we've said, oh, put on the brakes. We need to get you to put the infrastructure in place before you can do anything. And then from that, you can decide what device will work for your students. But those type of decisions won't happen. And if your vision is established to improve achievement for students, then when you meet at the table, you can have a conversation that's meaningful for everybody and assign those roles. When I worked in Region 13, the IT director would always call up and say, they say they need this software installed right now. Can you explain why right now, why it's an emergency? Because I'm working on the security issue over here. And we would have to have the conversation. In my role, I understood why they needed it right now, because they needed to do an assessment for teacher evaluation. But he's kind of like, I'm working on the security issue. I said, no, you need to get this installed right now. They need the assessment scores tomorrow, so the teachers can start writing the evaluations so they don't revolt against their administrator. So, again, get everyone to the table.
Which brings us to professional development. And as Michelle and I were talking about this, it really was, professional development for IT people to know exactly what we were just talking about. Why does all of this stuff need to happen? But vice versa, professional development for teachers and administrators to get the IT side of things.
So we said that professional development has to be reciprocal. That in order, I don't need to know, and my boss was, I took a picture of something that was in the keynote, I was like, I have no idea what I'm taking a picture of. If you were like, here's $1 million, explain it, I wouldn't be getting the $1 million, but I was just taking pictures of it. But if he gives me that foundational understanding of what needs to happen with the infrastructure, I can guide people along in decisions that they make for their students, and vice versa. If he's making a decision that's going to impact the back end of technology, he has to keep that end user in mind, that student in mind. And in order for that to happen, there has to be professional development. So I know in our practice, we try to, in all of our district leadership teams, to kind of infuse things that are very technical based, and also infuse things that show how that technology can be used for the end user. So that professional development.
The one that we tried this year for the first time, I've been very interested in unconferences, and so we actually brought an unconference to our district. We called it Tech Camp RSD 13, and it was the first time that we had our entire school district, K-12, and IT, everybody, administrators, everybody was together in one building doing an unconference where people were kind of selecting and saying, here's what I need, and people were trying to see what they could meet, and we posted the schedule on the back wall. It was the best professional development that people had said they'd ever been to. And we just did another survey, and it was like 93% of people said, this is what we want to do again, because this is what had met our needs.
And I know that I think your IT director had sessions on things that he felt that teachers needed to know that they were never going to take the time to learn unless they had a good 20 minutes just to talk to him. So he came up with a list of, if I could run professional development for a day, this is what I would be teaching teachers. I would teach them how to search their email properly, make rules in their email so they don't have to go contact me later. And it was very foundational, fundamental, but he had the chance.
I need things on your desktop. That was a really big one.
And it seems so silly, but he's like, this is what drives me crazy and wastes my time and my staff's time on a daily basis. And he had the opportunity to provide that professional development that so many times gets overlooked because there's so much to do. So I thought that model was one that everyone could feel like, this is my role, this is what I'm strong at, and I can communicate that to other people. And you can feel again that you're working towards that.
And not being afraid to ask for help for things that are seemingly maybe seem silly, but but really aren't. They're really important.
It's something you guys are discussing, like a good ground, like a foundation, I guess, for how to use more basic functionality, and then working from there to.
Well, not a little bit of both, because I think what happens a lot is that you are so excited about that new technology that we don't spend the time in those, and you want to apply it so quickly to what your professional role is, either with students or with administrators or IT, that you forget to fill in those gaps. And it's true with students, it's true with us, and sometimes those gaps slow us down in the daily function. So I think that's what he was trying to do. And just that opportunity to say that what he's doing is important, just as important to the teachers, because it's the community that makes it successful. So find time to provide that foundational understanding.
There's times when the teachers are like, oh, why isn't this happening? And they don't ever get to see the IT people and talk to them. And so this was a great time for them to get an understanding of why instantly their blah 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 didn't get fixed. Well, because this other stuff was going on. So that was a really, I think it was a great use of time, and everybody came out feeling better about what they before they came in.
And the last one, and possibly what we think is the most critical, is communication and transparency. We didn't really see a huge explosion, I know in Region 13 and myself now in Middletown, until we made sure we paid attention to the communication component. And communication being internally and with the public. So many times we're working in our silos, in our role, and we forget to explain to others why we're making the decisions we're making. So first, if we have that shared vision, we get to it at the table, but then as we start to implement, we forget to keep on communicating and saying this is what's being successful, or this is what we need to improve upon. We forget to do that component. And a lot of things can happen if you forget to do that component. I'm thinking of, in her district, because I got called in Middletown because they wanted me to explain it, where they installed the new software. I won't say what it is, I won't give the whole story, but he installed it, and instead of communicating, saying this is why I put it on all of your devices, he just installed it and didn't tell anybody. And then someone Googled it. And you know what happens when you Google things. And they realized that it could be used to spy on each other. And then it turned into this huge thing, right? Am I telling the story right? Mm-hmm. And then it was going to get grieved, and the union was involved, and it really all it was for him to be able to push out software. That's all it was. And had that piece of communication been put in Previously, it would have probably stopped the panic and stopped people from angrily calling people all over the state to find out how is our IT director spying on us. So we have that communication.
Yeah, I was going to say, so the other piece I think that's been really effective in Region 13 was communication with the public. And Michelle's going to talk a little bit more about the financial part because that was her end of it. But we ended up a few years ago starting to use Twitter. This year we're actually starting to use Facebook with our parents and the community members, and to share all of the things that we are doing technology-wise in our schools. And we really believe that because of all of that sharing and that knowledge, it has allowed us to increase, and Michelle will give you all the details about that, increase the amount of technology and the types of things we are able to ask for and use. Simply because we've been able to be very clear and show parents and show people that are voting about why we need these things and what the learning is happening because of it.
Just numbers-wise, what it did to their budget, their leasing budget was able to grow by 4 times the amount. In 2007, when I started there, their tech budget was around $70,000. Right now, it's about $500,000. And it has to be a strong correlation between, even more than that when you add salaries and all the additional staffing that they were able to add. But the reason for that was because of that communication and transparency. That every decision was made was communicated to the people that were part of that community, the teachers, the administrators, the parents. I remember a couple of years ago, the teachers had been fighting for years for smart boards and projectors in every classroom. And it would always get cut from the budget. But that same year, when they added it back in, they're like, we're just going to go for it. We're going to say the whole district's going to get smart boards. And, Casey. The whole district's going to get smart boards and projectors. We're going to go for it. But that same year, the other thing that happened was a huge presence on Twitter. And we made sure the local news organizations knew that we existed on Twitter. And in that year, we were retweeted in the Middletown Press. The Hartford Current came to interview a roundtable from the district about our use of Twitter. We had teachers presenting at tech conferences and then telling the community about it. We had students presenting to the Board of Ed of why they should be allowing kids in elementary school to begin a coding program. We had students presenting at conferences about global education. And that smart board plan in the budget sailed right through. It was never even thought about to be cut from the budget. Every single thing that was requested that year for technology made it through the budget. Probably the only time. We were like, oh my gosh, this is still happening. They haven't cut anything yet. And it just kept going through the budget process, and everything kept just sailing right through. And it was because of that communication and transparency that the parents felt very comfortable calling us and saying, this is what a child needs, or he's going to go elsewhere. And the school district willing to say, how can we make this happen? How can we bring everyone to the table to make sure we're servicing our clients, the students, and we were able to do that. And I think that's probably, for us, what was the most important thing in me being successful. So that was like the fastest we ever did presentations.
Well, that was great. Get us started. All right, we're going to do some questions for these guys and see where we want to go with things. So questions from the audience, please.
I guess I would say, do you feel like there's almost a need, not a need, but it's, you can almost sort of skip the desktop a little bit and move more to like touchscreen devices? I feel like there's a big difference between using a Windows-based computer and using touchscreen. And there's a lot of people that are just, avoiding the desktop and going right to tablets.
I think it really, it always goes back to, I think that vision, it really is important to what's you're trying to achieve in your organization. So I can't give an answer to that. I know how I feel about it. I know that at K2 I still love the iPad because of that creativity and mobility and the apps that are available. My answer would be different for every grade level. And I know that when I sit down at the table with the curriculum leaders and superintendent, and knowing because I have so many students that are free and reduced, and they tell me you need to think about Wi-Fi access at home, I know so many things are brought to the table when other people talk to me, and they change my mind all the time. So I can't give the answer, but what I can do is have conversations to get to what are we doing, and what device is going to work for us. And the willingness to say that didn't work, let's try something new next year.
You said it was important to get infrastructure in place first. How was that battle?
Well, we had to spend, I think we spend a lot of time, and we do in Middletown because we're still growing, is educating our leaders. Because it was just, there was just not a fundamental understanding of why this infrastructure needs to be in place to be successful. And I think once we just kept, that was the song, we said every meeting, we made the agreement, every meeting anytime someone asks about this, the only answer we'll give is when we have our correct infrastructure in place to allow for it. And through grant funding, the state funding that they did last year for school districts, our E-rate funding, we were able to do that, and we're still working on it. But it has to be education, because people become so focused on their role and their responsibilities that it's hard to, and rightfully so, think about the big picture. So once we gave that education to our leaders, we were able to allow it to be received. And teachers are starting to have conversations like, well, we don't have the right switches. I'm like, oh my gosh, we just had a good conversation. That's good. So, right. And then someone called and they're like, I don't think we have a drop for this copier. We had this meeting. I'm like, I'm so proud of you. And they don't even, like 2 years ago, they were like, why doesn't the copier work? So it's those kind of conversations and those little things that we need to teach people so they don't think it's us versus them, that it's that we're a community and we all have a role in it.
And I think in Region 13, I've been noticing over the last couple of years that the same kind of decisions are happening where we're not going to get any more of this until the switches and stuff are upgraded because things were getting kind of old. So, I think even in our district, that kind of stuff is still, everybody's talking about it. It is important.
And it's really cool to watch that the kids know so much that they can be like, no, this is why they're doing that, and they kind of explain it. So the kids are very helpful.
One of the things on your social media program that you did, were you clear about communicating with a timeline for responses? One of the things I see failures that people tend to make with social media is now you've created a position that expects 24-hour response. Because saying you're on Facebook, saying you're on Twitter, somebody tweets you something and they don't get a response in 15 minutes, you may get an angry tweet on the other side of it. So have you addressed that? And do you have a policy procedure for keeping that updated?
No.
Okay.
And I think originally we were like, as soon as we made policy and procedure, teachers would be like, oh, you're going to make us do this.
Right.
So
that's
we
what
didn't
I was
want to do
concerned
that.
too.
But what happened is, if you, especially for the education world, the teachers are quietly very proud of what they do, but they're also very humble in the sense that they don't want to tell anybody they're doing it. They don't want to be bragging. But they do want an opportunity to do that. And also teachers are very competitive. Tell you. So it kind of happened on its own, but I think one of the most important things we did is we had workshops for parents on it. And we made it very clear that this was a one-way really communication. This was our way to communicate to parents of what we were doing and their way to have a dinner conversation that was meaningful. Not like, what did you do in school today? Nothing. It's, oh, I saw that you did this. Tell me about it. And we made it pretty clear to them right away that please don't expect this kind of conversation happening. We just want you to be informed. And if you have the question, ask your child, because that's who is really, we want to know where the information is coming from. Teachers, naturally just were like, oh, they did that in the classroom, let me show what I did in my classroom, and let's start it. And it just naturally turned into this healthy competition of who's tweeting the best and the brightest. And a lot of teachers have been interviewed by CEA, educational magazines, because they're so good at communicating and celebrating what their kids are doing. But I think as soon as you put a policy in place, you're really yelling.
Well, one of the things that I see, and I just add my 2 cents on it, it makes it very easy for news outlets, for community to find you if you're on the social channels,
Absolutely.
especially if you're preaching about what was done in the classroom. If they're doing a story on whatever, that's their first form of research for most media outlets.
I know, was it a year or two ago, we had WFSB approach. They saw it's a teacher tweeting about their coding program with 5th graders, and a couple days later she was in the news. And what better publicity for your organization? And unfortunately, it's part of the job responsibility now as an educator in this age where information is so quickly being exchanged that you have to have a presence, and your presence should be positive. And we should all be singing kind of the same song, but it's very, I think, I know in Middletown we're only in the infancy of our social media communication, so to say you have to do something is probably not going to be very successful for us, but to watch people kind of explore the possibilities. My associate superintendent joined Twitter for the first time. Her first tweet was at a conference of 300 people, and the keynote called her out. Her very first tweet, she's like, oh my gosh, they can see me. But after that, she was like taking pictures and all excited. So you have to find where people are and let that grow.
And I think that's why we changed to Facebook this year, was because we did do a survey, and parents were like, you know what? Unfortunately, parents are still on Facebook, like that's where they are. And Twitter wasn't working for everybody, even though we have, you know, just the feed posted on everybody's websites and things like that. Facebook was more, you know, it was mobile for them, and it was much easier. So that's what we're switching to now. And so there's, you know, one person, maybe it's the secretary, that's in charge of posting things, and the teachers can give things to her to post for them. So we're also, you know, cognizant that we don't want to make, now you've got to do Twitter, now you've got to do Facebook, because that's too much. But, you know, what other ways can we celebrate what we're learning? And I think it's made a really big impact. You know, in our district, it's, you know, there are all kinds of people that are seeing the great stuff that's happening in our schools, which wasn't happening before.
And I think the other part of it is also going back to everyone thinking about this type of shift in communication is, in some of our buildings, we can't have everyone tweeting because we haven't given everyone a tablet or device. And for them to take a picture, get it to, you know, email it to themselves, again, however they're doing it, them to use their personal devices. So sometimes we have to say, no, we have to put on the brakes, we're not there yet. What else can we do? What other tools can we use? Can we use Remind to send text messages? Can we use Facebook so we can do it after school? Can one person be in charge of it? And help them say, until we can bring the devices to you, what are different ways that we can achieve the same thing? And sometimes students will be like, oh, I went to a conference about Twitter, and now everyone better be tweeting, but you don't have the system in place to do it. So that's why that collaboration is important. And I think I'm getting this signal that we have to stop talking.
We have 1 more minute. If I can ask a quick question. Of your 4, which was wonderful, thank you, we really didn't get a question on PD. You mentioned unconferences as a strategy that you're using, which I think is wonderful. You also, what I heard was that it was a way for other voices to be heard to kind of create an agenda, which is great. So you could fill in those holes that maybe a leadership position may not understand where those holes exist. If somebody's interested in getting started with that and taking advantage of that kind of bottom up, what would you suggest? How would they get started? Where would they get more information for that?
Wow, we just don't have to be through the organizers at Camp CT. So you can come on down at the Walker School. I think it's August 15th or 16th. We'll look it up and tell you at the end. But it's a great place to get started. It's free. But for us, we even started it earlier where we would just meet with teams of teacher and say, we have no agenda, let's define what do you need, and get that from there. So small versions of it can happen by just getting people together. And if you have that vision, that shared vision, you can say, okay, what do we need right now, and how can we address that in that informal environment?
What was the conference you just said?
At Camp CT.
And I would like to add that there are a lot of places doing student conferences. You know, what do students need, and asking them what they need, which I think is also another valuable thing.
We didn't know this ahead of time, but I've been to that and it's wonderful. So I highly recommend it.
If you've never been, it's really, I mean, it really.
And free prizes.
Lots of prizes,
That conference model
amazing
would be scary
food,
up front,
milkshakes, potato chips.
It's about bringing like people that would normally sort of have input about decision-making process into it and learning
There's
about it.
rooms and time slots, and the agenda is completely blank, and the people who are participating in the conference get to go and fill in the blanks and see what they want to talk about. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the 2 rules are, 1, you have to participate, even if it's just asking questions, and 2, if you're not happy or you aren't able to participate in that session, you're expected to get up and move. So instead of trying to slink out the back and have no one see you because you're not interested in that session,
Or we're sitting there being like, oh my God.
yeah, the expectation is, no, we want you to get up and go have a meaningful experience somewhere else.
And if the session isn't there, that you don't see something, you know, go have a conversation in the hallway. You know, whatever it is that this is your day, make it useful and valuable for yourself.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That was great. You guys want to tab over to the other one?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm thrilled to be able to talk after the last presentation because it's really the same theme. And the theme is communication. So the presenters, great. Presenters talked about, from the education side, how communication is needed to deal with technology. We see it from the technology side. So what my company does is we assist school districts to implement or deploy or manage technology. And if you've got to seek an outside entity, that means that there's significant problems that have built up and can't be resolved. Our focus is to find the bridges and identify where problems exist and how to resolve them. And over time, it's very obvious where the pattern is for problems and successful school districts. First thing that we insist on with our client is to work with administration and create a mission statement. What do you want technology to do in the district? Sometimes this process can be bubble up from the teachers. Sometimes it comes from the administration on down. In all cases, the successful school districts, this is a unified process where everybody is contributing, everybody is participating. One of the districts, the grant that was mentioned from last year, one of our clients that we worked with achieved the highest per capita grant allocation. And that was due because we had worked with administration, with the teachers, and identified that infrastructure was needed, and identified to the state that it was Torrington. Torrington was grossly underserved in their Wi-Fi, so we took their level of technology from 400 active devices to 16,000 active devices, and won the largest per capita grant. One of the questions that came up was about how do you upgrade your infrastructure. The FCC has made it very, very clear that E-rate is really critical and is aware that infrastructure is really poor in a lot of school districts. So there's a one-time exception that they're going to allow for this year and 16 that you can back end for the next 3 years your E-rate reimbursement. So if you're fortunate enough to have a high reimbursement rate, it's really critical for this year and next year to apply your maximum distribution. And you can go out 3 years and now say, no, you'd like to apply that for all your level 2 category hardware. And that can provide a significant infrastructure boost. In any case, it starts with a mission statement. We know what the trends are: lighter, mobile. The trends are universal. I tend not to get into, is it better Windows machines versus iPads versus Chromebooks? That to me is religion, and we're more of an agnostic organization. You can make an argument when you look at the different hardware types that certain hardware applies to different to either different schools or to different students. And any one hardware platform could be distorted or twisted. We have one client that they're Apple, and they're Apple Airs, and there's 1 million of them, and they've even taken an Apple server and turned it into a Windows server, which is bizarre to me, but that's a whole other issue. And the irony is that they've got pilot programs where the teachers are using those as Chromebooks because they've loaded Chrome on them. And I said, okay, you guys have spent $1,300 for a Chromebook. I got it. But the pattern is universal. The devices are becoming lighter. They're becoming cheaper. And we are at a time that it's really exciting to be in technology. What's missing is the communication. Technologists tend to be right-brain people. Yes, no, black, white. Educators tend to be left-brain. Talk, 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 talk. Both have their strengths, both have their weaknesses. The focus of technology from an enterprise viewpoint. So you've got this whole process going on where devices are becoming less, smaller, more impactful to education. What's also happening? More apps. Those apps have to exchange data. That data has to be controlled, managed. Schools are now becoming data centers. What's missing is the enterprise rules that banks, mortgage companies have been dealing with for many years. That's going to creep into education. And I can tell you we experienced this firsthand because there was an accusation at one of our clients that grades were being manipulated. If you want an organization to stop, put yourself on the front page of the paper with grade manipulation. That will change your agenda, I promise you. That process is going to occur more and more to school districts as the data that everybody depends on is either outsourced or insourced or manipulated. The best value is it lowest cost, is it easiest use, or is it greatest impact? So what is the best value equation for a school district? Is it the lowest cost? Can I just have a show of hands? Lowest cost. So the best thing to do in a school district is to have the lowest cost for equipment. Is it easiest use? Okay. Greatest impact? Yeah, I'm with you guys.
I want all three.
I want all three too, but the truth is that the lowest cost, Chromebooks are great tools. They really don't work for younger kids for a lot of reasons. The video experience is not very rich. Maybe 5 years from now, that'll be a different process. I'm just talking about as of now. So what really matters is the greatest impact, because you're going to get those students' attention for a short period of time, but you want to maximize the investment. These are all business terms. This is why I said the enterprise push is coming in, because when you articulate the message to the administration, to the board, which are generally business people, you want to speak with the business language. So you talk about greatest impact. Dysfunctional schools. God, thank God there's these. Technologists are relegated to support roles only. When do you ever see a technologist? When there's a problem, something's broken. You never see them the rest of the time. In fact, we took over one district and they told us that literally they had not seen a technician in 2.5 years. Now, I don't know how you fix anything if you don't see them, but the fact is they were completely disconnected from educators. High frustration rate of educators. We put in complaints, we called, we put in tickets, nobody ever responds. When that occurs, when there's that level of disconnection, data loss will occur. And what I mean by that is that could be a gym teacher who has recorded student information on their iPad and is now pushing it out to the cloud over an unencrypted channel, which is both a HIPAA and CHIPA violation. And you're going to have interoperability of software. All of a sudden you're going to get a request that says, well, I need this information. Yeah, but it's in a completely unportable platform. Technology can't fix education. We think it might, it can't. Education can't invent technology. I can't tell you the number of teachers who have said, well, I know it's possible, I saw it in another district. What did you see in another district? Well, it all just worked. It doesn't all just work. The two groups have very different languages, and what the previous presentation did was discuss the methodology to bring the languages together, and that's a hugely important effort. My point from the technology side is to have the conversation, because the districts that are successful are having those conversations. They're getting groups of technologists and teachers and parents together and discussing where to go. So when we work with a school district, one of the things we absolutely insist on is the technology and teachers meet frequently. Technology listens to the educational directives. Education listens to the limitations of technology. I want an iPad that'll run for 3 days, and I want it to connect up to the school Wi-Fi, but I want it to do it from the next town. No, it doesn't work. But it should. I know it can. And that's when you have to then discuss there are certain limitations. It was interesting, we had a school district in New Jersey. They wanted, this is actually a pretty funny story. Superintendent said, I want to do an initiative. This is a very wealthy district, okay? I want an initiative. We're going to hand out iPads to every single student that comes in the fall. I'm going to put 3G on the iPads so that the students can use them at home. We don't need infrastructure in the schools. This is all going to work. I said, that's phenomenal. Problem, there's no towers near you. They're not going to connect to anything. This is a very wealthy district, so if you've ever worked in a wealthy town, you'll notice your cell service is really poor because they don't want cell towers in their town. And this was in the middle of the town. There was no cell towers. You literally had one bar if you were outside. You're not going to hand out 900 iPads and have them work. There's no infrastructure. So in that case, what we did was say to the superintendent, it was a wonderful idea, and let Verizon and Sprint and AT&T tell them that it's a great idea, and 5 to 7 years from now, we can implement it. Outsource or augment your IT support. So how do you fix it? Bring in help. So if you're going to add services or communicate, get some help. Replace the technology team or augment and re-educate the technology team. Technologists have to understand that they're part of the support mechanism. Your customers are your teachers. And I can't tell you the number of technologists that I've dealt with that have said, teachers are stupid. They're just dumb. They're never going to get it. And part of that is true. And they will find enough empirical evidence of teachers that are just trying to get through to retirement. And they're not going to learn anything new. And there's a percentage of every consuming population that no matter how much help you provide, how much information you provide, you will never get through to them. That's not your target audience if you're a technologist. Your target audience is the top percentage that will eat and breathe technology. They just can't wait for you to deploy new technology. They will bring the next section together. So in every population, it's always 20% at the top. No matter what you do, they will work with you. They will spend the time, they will stay after school, they will do whatever it takes to work with you. Then you'll have the bottom, the middle 50%. They'll be influenced by the top 20%. They may stay, they may not. But if you can get those converts up at the top to work, they will bring the 50% in the middle with you. The bottom 30, there's not a whole lot you can do other than to say you're here to help. And eventually, maybe they'll get it or they'll leave. Typical improvement plans. Treat education as customers. They are your customers if you're a technologist. What's your satisfaction rate? Do polls. Talk to them. Change the technology culture. I can't tell you how much that's important. Every single failed district that we've worked with, and I mean failed in that they've thought negatively about technology, both internally and externally. The board thought we have a huge technology problem. It all came down to the change in the technology culture. And that comes down to communication. Do the two groups see each other? Establish a controlled and monitored support request system. Tickets are really critical. Educators like to talk. That's a problem. Get them to talk in a ticket. And I will tell you that the key to getting people to talk in a ticket or a response system of some sort is fast response. So that's got to become a really critical component. Is if they put in a ticket, they get a response. And I don't mean an automated response. Everybody gets the automated response. I mean, yes, I will have somebody look at that tomorrow. As soon as you as technologists, as soon as you drop the ball on a response, you have dropped the equation. You have said you care, now you've proven you don't. Because that's what your customer thinks. Establish a meaningful tech committee. Generally, a good tech committee has somebody from SPED. Those people will find new and interesting ways to abuse technology. Get somebody in special education incorporated in. Develop standardized platforms. So whether that's for SPED and there's a certain set of applications and there's a certain set of requirements, standardize them. Get them all under a package. Look at your licensing. Is your licensing out of whack because you've done pick and choose? You've gone this app here, that app there, this feature here, that feature there. If you were to broaden the spectrum of the number of apps you're using, could you in fact save money? We had one, there's an app called Kurzweil. It's a SPED app. We had one district, they licensed 30 copies, and I want to say it was $15,000 a year. We went to Kurzweil. It's got text to speech, speech to text. It's a whole SPED app. We then brought into the technology committee all the features that this app can do. Yeah, we'd like that in regular ed too. You know, that really would help. Okay. Spoke to Kurzweil. Turned out that if we converted the licensing to a district-wide licensing, it cost $6,000 more to put it on 4,000 computers. So we started with a small little SPED-based app, but went to the vendor and said, hey, you know, what's the possibility here? All of a sudden, we could license it for everybody for $6,000. It was easy. Plus, we got their licensing in compliance. Now that it's standardized, all of a sudden the SPED teachers can teach the other teachers. Now what do we have? We have permanency. And it's going to be really critical and useful ongoing. So establish a meaningful tech committee. Somebody from SPED should be on there. Somebody from administration, generally the assistant superintendent, should be on there. And here's the hardest thing. Assistant superintendent does not run that meeting. The technologist runs this type of committee. The assistant superintendent is there to help with the budget process, because anything that the teachers want, they're going to need to raise capital for. That's going to come under the superintendent's budget. So as part of what the previous speaker said, have everybody involved. This is the mechanics of how you get people involved in the process. Biggest difference between successful technology and non-successful technology: communication, listening, and dialogue. It's not about platforms. It's not about apps. It's not about devices. It's about making sure we're all speaking the same language and moving forward in the same way. Steps, long and short successful plans. Everything that I'm saying and recommending, do it in baby steps. Build upon success. Do a survey. Find out, is everybody on board? Is it all on the same page? Is the technology getting deployed in the right way? Discuss practical goals. Who will do the training? Training is really critical. The old model used to be you would buy a smart board or an app and you bring the vendor training in. It typically doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because as soon as that trainer walks out the door, your training is just left. Best thing to do, that 20% that I mentioned up at the top, get them to train everybody else. Now you might bring in the vendor or a third party to train that top 20%. That totally makes sense. But now the district captures that knowledge. Think about how compliance is measured, how to confirm the technology is being used. That could be as part of a teacher assessment that they have to do a technology class and demonstrate. That's where administration comes in, which is why you want the assistant superintendent or the superintendent involved. Experiment. Better to experiment and fail than not to experiment at all. No success exists without failures. Try, try, try. Develop a core set of technology teachers, which we talked about. That's the top 20%. Have teachers teach each other. No sage on stage. Not like here. Once taught, confirmed through assessment or monitoring that the technology is being used, have teachers perform peer review. Pretty much get everybody to work together. Some of the trends for 16-18. Some things I find really interesting. Windows tablets are going to go down to under $125. And that's going to be pretty exciting because it's going to give a whole other piece of hardware to play with. Chromebooks are greater usage than leveling off. I think education needs a lot more rich media experience. Increased and then flat usage of Google Classroom. There are limits within that architecture. Google is phenomenal, but there are limits to the interoperability of it. Decreased usage of iPads. And there will be another device, I can't tell you what it looks like, but it's going to be much more media rich than an iPad is. And that really is where education is going to benefit. Challenges, 16-18, understanding and maintaining data security. And when I say this, I can't tell you how critical this is. I come from an enterprise background. I've been in technology since I was 13 years old, and I can tell you that every single data center I've been in when it comes to a school doesn't meet the standards of a corporate environment. It will. In the next decade, it will. And unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of disasters between now and then. Things that I've seen, you walk in, there's the list of passwords right up on the wall. Thank you for making it very easy for me to hack in and see student data. I really appreciate that. Understanding the importance of data. Your lunch program, is it tied to grades? Can parents refresh the lunch account remotely? Is that tied to activities? Is that tied to the health records? Who's thinking about how all this data comes together? Wouldn't it be great, and don't tell me it's not going to occur, that if you could correlate a child who misses lunch performs poorly in the 3rd grade? Don't tell me your parents a few years from now aren't going to demand that type of detailed, driven data. Data mining, help target student activities, ongoing challenges of data interoperability. I think that was it. Question?
I was wondering why you felt the Google Classroom setup couldn't handle growth. Won't there be vendors that come out with tools that connect it to student information systems?
Google's model is that everything goes to Google, okay? At some point, somebody's going to wake up, or Google will start charging for that, and the entire equation will change. Google can only continue to do that when their stock price is where it is. At some point, there will be either an antitrust argument made, like Exxon was. Listen, I'm 51 years old. I've gotten a chance to see the sun several times. Every time you have a monopoly, you create an environment that is then broken up. It happened to Exxon. I promise you it will happen to Google. They will be a victim of their own success. When they become a victim of their own success, they will not have a profitable model any longer. And events will then go. I'm not talking about 1 or 2 years. I'm probably talking about a decade from now. But you need to be aware of that now. That's why I like, personally, my prejudice is on-site hosting as much as possible. I think it's important, plus it reduces the amount of connectivity required to and from. But you can deploy it mono, locally, on your own servers internally. You have an internal bandwidth. You're not using anything external. You've got direct connectivity to PowerSchool. Parents can interact, and it's completely controlled and managed within the school district. So the district can then make sure that backups are done, that security is applied. You have a lot stronger argument.
I have to jump in, I'm sorry. So you're saying you trust the many different local data centers that we run in our schools versus a Pearson who would host PowerSchool for us? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that is what I'm saying.
I can't guarantee our network would be up as reliably as a data center that's like a Fort Knox.
And that's the discussions that will continue to occur. Okay? I'm not, I mean, Pearson, for example, is one example that we've worked with 3 different districts in the last year to bring it internally because performance was a significant issue.
And you were able to identify that being a performance issue on the data center at the Pearson end, or a connectivity issue, or?
All of the above.
Bottleneck along the way.
All of the above. Bringing it in-house, we literally took the number of tickets. From one district, we would get, I want to say 200 tickets a year, down to 1, just by relocating it internally.
There's so many factors. It could have been
That's why I can't,
a bottleneck anywhere along the communication structure.
I think we have time for one more question. I told everybody I would stick to the 12:30, 11:30. So any other questions? No? Any other comments from the distinguished speakers? All right, well, thank you everyone for coming. I appreciate it. I think this was an interesting